Well, hello, everyone. My name is Ken Siladi, and I'm one of the Bridge Conference ministers of the newly formed Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ. I'm joined today by the Reverend Traci Blackmon. Good morning, Traci.
Good morning, Ken. How are you?
I am well. Good to see you today. Traci is the Associate General Minister for Justice and Local Church Ministries and the Senior Pastor of Christ the King Church in Florissant, Missouri. So we are really glad to have you with us, Traci. We wanted to talk about an initiative that was launched on January 1st here in the Southern New England Conference, where we have invited all of our churches, our 609 congregations, to participate in the RIP Medical Debt Initiative. So I wanted to start out, Traci, going to ask you some questions along the way and have a conversation with you about this. And the first question is, we are aware of the fact that this initiative has taken place in two other places in the United Church of Christ, and that we're the third place where that's going to be happen. Can you say a little bit about how the United Church of Christ got connected into RIP medical debt, and what has been the experience to date about that?
Sure. And thank you for this invitation, Kent. RIP medical debt started in 2014, actually, in New York City. And there have been multiple churches that have participated in this effort. It seems now that the largest amount of contributors are from a church base, and that is because it's one way that the church can act collectively and have a voice, and it's having an impact in the communities that they serve. It was started by two former debt collectors who closed their private practices and began this foundation. They began that foundation with external benefactors that agreed to cover their overhead and their salaries, and began using their license and their connections to purchase debt, not for the purpose of continuing to squeeze people who don't have money, but for the purpose of being able to release some pressure from those who are already being squeezed everywhere else. RIP medical debt does not forgive all debt. It has a very targeted audience. That audience is those who are living at or below the poverty line. And of course, those whose debt has been written off in such a way that it ends up with debt collectors. As you may know, Kent, that the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical debt. And while there are many hospitals who have charitable arms that write off a lot of debt, there are people who get lost in the gap between those services. And those are those that are targeted by RIP medical debt. Last Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving 2019, but Thanksgiving 2018, I was reading the New York Times, and I read this story about these two elderly women who held a tea in New York City that was a fundraiser. And at this fundraiser, they raised $12.5 thousand. And I really started reading the article because the little old ladies were so cute on the front of the article, and I wanted to see what was going on. I thought it would be just a feel-good story. But when I heard that they had raised this $12,500 and donated it to RIP medical debt, and that $12.5 thousand had purchased $1.5 million of debt for people living in New York around them, I was intrigued. And so I began to do some research on this company and also began to just monitor them for about 6 months. At the time, I was monitoring them because at every General Synod, we try to have some justice footprint from the national setting that we leave in an area. Of course, we were on our way to Milwaukee. And this was originally going to be the justice footprint in Milwaukee. So I began, after about 6 months, corresponding with RIP medical debt. It is difficult to reach them just by a phone number. That's not, so it took some emails before I got connected with a live person and shared with them my vision. And they began looking for debt in Milwaukee, and we had found debt. We were going to purchase some debt in Milwaukee as a contribution to the footprint of the United Church of Christ, having been there for Senate. As we got closer to the deadline for that purchase, I got a call from RIP Medical Debt saying, we have some good news and some bad news for you. The good news, the bad news, which I asked for first, is that you can't purchase debt in Milwaukee for your Senate. And the good news is because a family foundation has purchased all the debt in the state of Wisconsin.
Wow.
So that made me even more intrigued, and I began to talk with my team and some internal partners in the national setting. Every time I would tell the story, people would be emotional and begin to cry. And even my staff were like, how do we donate individually to this? So we felt like we were onto something. We chose to do a trial run on this. And let me say, you mentioned that, currently I serve as a pastor and as a national officer. And this is my 10th year in pastoring. And so last year, to celebrate that 10th year, I said, I don't want you trying to surprise me with a party or anything. I want us to contribute to this debt abolishment. So we were doing that in my local setting. Of course, I can't mix those things. And so the money we had set aside for the national setting to do this, we began to say, who might be a good partner for us? We chose just randomly Illinois, because Illinois was next door to Milwaukee, and because Trinity's choir had come to sing at Senate. We said, let's see if there's any interest there so we can pilot this program. And I talked to Dr. Otis Moss, who did his research and got on board with it. I talked to Husto, who was the conference minister there, who got on board with it, and a few more United Church of Christ congregations came on board with us in Chicago. So actually in October of last year, we launched in Chicago with the Illinois Conference, Trinity United Church of Christ, Covenant United Church of Christ, Pilgrim United Church of Christ, and a small conglomerate of Baptist churches that were in the city. We raised collectively $38,000.
Right.
And that $38,000, we were able to pay to abolish $5.3 million of debt.
Incredible.
When you abolish the debt, you get a report of what zip codes the debt has been abolished in, the amount of money in every zip code, and every person, every family who has been impacted by the abolishment gets a letter. That letter for us is customized with RIP's logo on the outside, of course, but also the United Church of Christ logo. And inside of that letter is all the legal language necessary for that to be a part of their record. It lists the debtors that they were indebted to and the amount of money. And at the end of that list, it gives an account balance which says 0, paid in full. Encourages people to keep that letter for their records. And we were able to add our own verbiage to the bottom of the letter. So every letter ends with a paragraph that says, you may never enter the doors of one of our churches, but we are the United Church of Christ, and we love you. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. More importantly, God loves you, and your debt has been forgiven.
Oh my goodness, that's so awesome.
It was amazing, and we received a lot of press from that. Now, I told you that in St. Louis, we were already doing it at my church only. It was not a regional thing. But when that happened in Chicago and churches started to see it, pastors started to see it, I got a call from a UCC church in St. Louis who didn't know we were doing it and said, we have already met after we saw that on TV. We've already decided we want in. This is important, Kent. It's a church of about 39 to 40 average attenders. And they were calling me to say, we already have a little over $17,000 that we want to purchase this debt with. And so I told them we were doing it as well. And so we decided, well, let's reach out to the rest of the conference and see if Missouri Mid-South wants to. Of course, Jenny wanted to be in on it. And in St. Louis, with our churches there, not every church participated, but many did, 17 to be exact. And we received a matching grant from the Deaconess Foundation, which also has its roots in the United Church of Christ. We raised $104,000 there, and we purchased $12.9 million in debt to abolish. That was in January. We've decided as the Justice and Witness Ministries to try and do this at least in every region of the United Church of Christ, all the way until Synod. So I was ecstatic when we got a call from Southern New England that you were interested in being a part of this project, this campaign, which we hope will do two things. One, we wanted to, of course, alleviate debt and infuse hope into our communities. Three things, I'm sorry. The second thing we wanted to do is to be a collective impact from all of the United Church of Christ working together with one singular voice on an issue. And the third is to lift the justice concerns of healthcare inadequacy, of astronomical cost of healthcare, and to push political platforms in an election year towards having conversations, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, about how we're going to care for the people in our midst.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful to hear about the background. It answers some questions that we've been receiving as we've begun this initiative here. This is, we believe, in direct alignment with our own understanding of who the Southern New England Conference is called to be. Our why is to live the love and justice of Jesus.
Wow.
So we think that this initiative is in alignment with that particular statement of who we are and why we exist as a conference. And so we're really excited to be participating in this. Traci, what would you say the impact has been on the churches and the organizations? I know deaconesses have been part of this as well. What would you say the impact has been on those, on local congregations to participate in an initiative like this?
Oh my gosh, Kent, that was a surprise to me because I was not prepared for how actual congregations are being transformed. You know, we live in a time when most of the data we get about churches is about our dwindling numbers and our small sizes in the pews. And while that is true in a lot of places, it's probably true in most places, the majority of our churches see less than 200 members a Sunday, correct? Yes. Sometimes one can feel like the spies who went out with Joshua and Caleb, right? They come back to give the report to Moses. And even though God has said, you know, it's possible for you to be a part of this land, I don't necessarily buy the taking of land, but a part of this land, have a home here, they feel that we can't live there because there are giants, they say. A key part of that scripture for me, though, is that they report we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Not the people who live their eyes, but we look like small people in our own eyes. And I feel that because of the dwindling numbers in congregations and because of our disconnect from scriptural description of congregations to the media expectation of congregations, the capitalization of congregations, we often look like grasshoppers in our own eyes. So to see what we can do collectively, because we are the church, with congregations giving what they can give and not being measured by what someone else gives, and individuals giving what they can give, knowing that a part of what they give is the whole, creates the whole. One of my best stories about that happened in the Illinois, in the Missouri Mid-South, announcement of what we were doing. We always do a public announcement about what we're doing. And one of my members, who I know works a minimum wage job and barely makes enough to make ends meet. I know that because the church often has to help make ends meet. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
up to me and said, I was only able to commit $5 a week, but my $5 made this happen. And I still tear up when I think about that. It is transformative to realize in a very tangible way that every church is a part of something bigger than itself, right? And that too is the gospel. So it has transformed us in that way. The church I told you about, Christ Church, whose pastor is Reverend Rebecca Turner, who called and said they had $17,000. That was because they had money left over from a project or a contribution they had received, and they wanted to make sure that they used the money in alignment with what it was supposed to be for, and this was it. But when the next Sunday, when she announced that they were going to be a part of this, in that church that day, they raised another $7,000.
Wow.
For medical debt. So it's been transformative because what is missing in all of our public rhetoric right now is hope.
Yes.
And this is an actual injection and infusion of hope, not just for those people who are caught in this trap of medical debt, but also for the church to say the church is still needed, the church is still relevant, the church still makes a difference in everyday, tangible ways in the lives of people.
So I'm struck. I hadn't heard you tell the story of what's said in the letter about the United Church of Christ, and I'm struck by the power of that. One of the questions that's been raised by some members of our conference has been the question of it's an important and tangible way to reduce medical debt. There's no question that it does that for the lives of individuals who receive that amazing letter telling them their debt has been forgiven. But one of the questions that's been raised is that's a one way to approach medical debt. What about the systemic issues, the rising costs of healthcare, pharmaceuticals, insurance companies, that whole process that leads to such enormous hampering debt? What can we do? How does this address that? Does this get at the systemic questions? And how are we dealing in the United Church of Christ with the systemic questions?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. And you're accustomed to me, Kent, but many of your audience may not be. I talk in scripture because I live in scripture.
Please do.
So what we're talking about is the difference in helping the Samaritan and fixing the Jericho road, right?
Yes.
And of course, it would be ridiculous for me to say that this effort fixes the Jericho road. This effort is about helping the Samaritan, but helping the Samaritan gives us the platform and the attention to talk about the Jericho road and what we can do about the Jericho road. We have a fabulous advocacy policy office in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And they're speaking even today. They are finishing the toolkit for the advocacy portion of this effort that again will go from now until 2021. I have already begun to share our effort with those who are running for our highest office and are in debates right now. And we're getting very good feedback about that. We are talking with hospitals and with entities that do this work. I do want to say that it's not only Deaconess out of our affiliated ministries that have come on board, but Chisholm is a partner with us on this. Let me get it right. Cornerstone is a partner with us.
Wonderful.
The pension board is a partner with us. The insurance board has sent me a note that they are reviewing whether or not they're going to come on board with us. And so it's not just the national setting. It's not just the conferences that are responding. When Southern New England finishes, we'll be going to Central Atlantic. They've already asked next. Central Atlantic, we're going to the Heartland Conference, the New Change in Ohio.
Yes.
They've asked to be after that. So I'm just expecting it to catch on as wildfire. And it would be wonderful if we could get the attention of the nation just because people are hurting.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Just one other question, Traci. Because our folks are attentive to how much of resource is spent on administration of
Yes.
the program, that has been raised in our conversations with churches and people participating in this wonderful initiative. So might you say a word about the overhead costs of RIP medical debt? I know that concern has been lifted, so we should address it here.
Absolutely. And I did not approach it that way, though I did my research. My concern was how much of our money is going to be going to that overhead.
Yes.
And the answer to that is 3% of contributions are designated for administrative costs. Now, that doesn't mean that 3% of contributions are dedicated to CEO salary, because the parts that we didn't talk about, Kent, that I think are relevant around this is, as I said, every one of those families. So for St. Louis, that was 11,555 families, right? For Chicago, that was 5,833 families. Every one of those families receives this individual letter. And that means that someone's putting those letters together, someone's mailing them. Yeah. That's important. Mm-hmm. That all of that kind of cost, staff, et cetera, is covered with that 3%. In addition to just the mailing of the letters, because you're talking about a vulnerable margin of our society, which is also often a transient margin of our society because they're living at or below poverty, this initiative does not stop with that letter, because it's very possible that you can have an address on someone and they no longer live there by the time you do this. So there are also workers at RIP whose job it is to make sure that that is removed from the credit report of everyone who receives this letter. So they actually do that work. That's a reasonable administrative cost to me. When I compare that to the cost of every donation that goes to some of our larger foundations, it's a nominal amount.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really helpful to get that out there, because that concern has been raised, and a legitimate concern, and thank you for clarifying that.
I also do want to say that on the RIP website itself, there is a transparency section.
Yes.
And, you know, all of the financial documents are there.
They are there. Yes, thank you. So we're just so grateful for your time and what you've shared with us about this. You've answered a lot of questions that people have been wondering about, Traci, about this initiative. We are so excited about the possibility of all of our congregations making a contribution to RIP medical debt. We've invited individuals to give as well, some that will give right through their congregations, but starting next week, we hope, we'll do an online giving portal on our social media, so that if individuals want to contribute to this cause for the Southern New England Initiative, they'll be able to. We're going to run that through Lent, and our program will end on the Friday after Easter. April 17th will be the last giving date for our initiative. We've been heartened by about 26 congregations so far that have donated, and we're hoping we get to the number 609 by the time we're finished. We're really heartened by the response of people and the questions that have been raised through this. So we're grateful to you, Traci, for all of the work that got us to be able to participate in this ministry and this program. I love the Samaritan Jericho Road analogy. That's very helpful, and I think for us who are going to be donors to this initiative. Are there any last words you'd like to say to encourage us in this effort?
Absolutely. I just want to thank the Southern New England Conference. I'm grateful that it has even been considered and that there's all this energy around this program. this conference has been a leader in many of the initiatives of the United Church of Christ. And the questions are healthy questions, right? So we need that tension and agitation always to make sure that we are being responsible stewards with the things that are given to us. And so I welcome those questions. If other questions come up, and if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to make it up. I'll go and research it, because it's all in our best interest to have that first and foremost. I also want Southern New England to know that whatever you contribute, the National Conference also intends to be a partner with you in that, and that we will be contributing to your effort as we will contribute to every effort. Giving Tuesday was also the target for our debt abolishment campaign. We raised a little over $150,000 there. So we will be able to supplement any conference that doesn't reach, you have to reach $15,000 to make it worth purchasing for this.
Well, we're beyond that already, Traci.
Okay,
here at Southern
great.
New. So no worries about that. We're
Right.
beyond that already, and we've only got 26 churches.
I want to say thank you. And please know, I don't think I said this about the letter, which may make you tear up as well, Kent, but in the legal part of the letter, RIP includes this debt abolishment was made possible by, and the churches that contribute, the conference that contributes will be listed in the letter.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But will be listed in the letter as well.
Wonderful. Well, Traci, again, we are so grateful for your time today and for your leadership in the United Church of Christ and your ministry, which has encouraged us to be workers for the justice of the realm of God, and for the ways in which you helped our own alignment with living the love and justice of Jesus here in Southern New England come to fruition through this RIP medical initiative. And we will be talking to you very soon.
Thank you, Ken. Have a great day.
Blessings to you. Thank you again.